Ladies and gentlemen, I just finished watching The Last of Us Episode 1, and I gotta tell you, before we get into this, I thought this was just an awesome first episode. And that's coming from someone who's never fully played The Last of Us game. My experience with The Last of Us was watching it on my friend's bed in college. I would just be sitting there texting, doing, God knows what on my phone while he was playing the game. And at every cutscene that came up, I'd pick up my head, watch what was going on. So to be honest with you, I never fully played the game, and with him, I never even finished the story. So going in, I knew who Joel and Ellie were, but I didn't really know who Tess was, who Tom was, and who some of the other people in the story were. So coming from that perspective, this feels brand new to me, even though I know what The Last of Us was, even though I've watched my friends play it, even though I've heard of the lore, I've seen YouTube videos and things like that. So I'm coming in kind of fresh. I don't know all of the things, but before we continue, I just wanted to say major spoiler warning, not only just for this episode, but also for the games. I'm not going to go too crazy, but I do want to give that spoiler warning because if you haven't seen the show yet, you definitely don't want to watch this. But if you haven't seen the games or don't know anything about games, I highly encourage you probably do that first. You shouldn't really be here if you haven't heard anything because the games are the games, whatever. Anyway, so as you guys know, in the games, some crazy stuff happens over time, and I know a lot about what happens. I know about some of the big deaths. I don't want to say which one for those. I don't want to spoil anything specifically to The Last of Us 2, but I know about those big moments. So seeing this, I just knew of the big things that have happened in the games. I know Joel and Ellie, and I know their story, and that's about it. So I went in, like I mentioned, kind of blind, I guess I could say. And oh man, do I have a lot of thoughts. So the first thing that I want to address is Joel and Ellie. Like I said, I've never fully grasped their story. I know they're kind of like father and son, or father and daughter, I should say, but I never really fully grasped that. And to see it develop in the beginning was really cool. It was really nice to see. And not only that, it was also just nice to see the introduction to Joel, because one of the things that I do remember the most from watching my friends play the games was what happened at the start of the outbreak. And I gotta tell you, comparing this to other apocalypse shows, obviously it's merited because other apocalypse shows have value. I mean, that's where a lot of these things like The Last of Us get inspiration from and things like that. But seeing them introduce is always unique. I think this show really did it right, and it really took solid inspiration from its source material, which was the game, and did it really well. Now I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember what Joel's daughter's name was. I don't even know if they said it. I think they did at one point. I just can't remember. But seeing it be told from her perspective of seeing the outbreak begin, it was a really incredible way to set up the virus. And actually, looking back just a step before that, the introduction of the show, the very first, 3 minutes of it, where it was a flashback to the 1960s of them talking about the fungi virus and things like that. I liked that. It looked like that was a straight up callback to things like Dawn of the Dead from yesteryear. I'm talking about the original George A. Romero Dawn of the Dead. It reminded me a lot of that. So you get those callbacks right off the bat. You kind of get that gritty sense just from the jump of it. And then we flash forward into 2003, where again, like I mentioned, we're following Joel's daughter. And that was just really interesting because I have to be honest with you, it gave me this vibe that was very similar to the way it was at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm not saying the clicker virus or anything like that was. I'm specifically talking about how on the radio things were going on, but Joel and his daughter were just living their lives, and you hear things in the background, but they don't allow you to fully hear what's going on. Because I feel like that's the way it kind of was in the pandemic. A lot of people weren't paying full attention in the beginning. People thought that what was going on in China didn't really matter at the time, and I feel like it just gave that same sense here. It was really just interesting. So yeah, I think that was a nice callback to what was going on, especially seeing that it was in somewhat present time. I mean, that was in 2003, and then they flashed forward to 2023. But it was just really interesting because you got it from the daughter's perspective, and they told it very similar to the actual cutscene that was in the actual game. And the whole vibe that I got from this show. And if you see me looking over here, I'm looking at some notes I took during the episode, but the whole vibe I got during the show was it felt a lot like the cutscenes in the game. I'm not just talking about the start of the outbreak where the daughter sees the grandmother, with the fungi infection and things like that. I'm just talking about the whole thing. Specifically, one of the moments that really stuck out to me as being like, wow, this feels like I'm watching the game. Like it feels like I was sitting in my friend's dorm in college just watching it on his TV again. The moment specifically was when Tommy, Joel, and Joel's daughter were driving on the road and they realized the road was crowded, so they tried to go off on their own. And then, again, spoiler alert, what happened to Joel's daughter? Very, very, very similar shot for shot, it felt like, from what I remembered in my head, of what actually happened in the game. And I think there's a level that certain shows go to where sometimes that's a little too excessive when they do it that way, where it's like a splitting image, but sometimes it just works. And here I felt like it really did. So that was one of the things that I think is, really important sometimes. It just depends on how shows are done. This one did it right. And it's not only those moments where it felt like I was sitting in the back of the car, like in a cutscene. Specifically in my head, I'm going to the scene where they were driving on the grass. That felt like a cutscene. It felt like we were POV, we were in the backseat of the car, just like you would in a video game cutscene. And you don't see those shots as often in TV the way they were done. You felt like you were moving with it, just like a video game. But I thought that was honestly really cool. And I also thought back to really quickly about the beginning of that, the pandemic and all that stuff. The introduction was really interesting because you could tell at moments that they were forcibly removing the audio from what was going on in the real world, because in reality, if something like this were to happen, we probably wouldn't be paying close enough attention and it would come as a shock. I mean, this isn't exactly realistic what happened here, but it was a really cool detail to see that it was like no one was paying attention and things were going on in the background and no one really knew. So that was fun to see. But so I think one of the things in the beginning scene that just was interesting to me was like it was a classic video game trope, or movie trope, I should say. Joel's daughter just walks right towards the sound of what creepy was going on in the kitchen in the beginning of the outbreak. The whole time I was like, oh my God, why are you going there? Like, it's a classic movie trope, but not that that matters or anything. I just thought that was really funny. I just wanted to make a little note of that. But I thought after that, when she actually got into the kitchen, what had happened and what had followed was just really interesting to see. And then she immediately runs outside. Joel and Tommy are there and they come to save her. It was just a really, really cool way to introduce the pandemic. It gave other show vibes. Like, it felt like a callback to some other zombie apocalypse shows, things like Dawn of the Dead, the more recent one. I'm talking about Zombieland. I'm talking about all of them. I know that was a really odd example going from Zombieland to Dawn of the Dead, but whatever. I just like how this felt like its own thing, but it also gave homage to other shows, which was very just cool to see, and it stayed very true to the game. Now, I don't think I got to this yet because I'm honestly hyped. This episode was really good, guys. I'm not going to lie. I really like this. But I do want to say before I continue and before I forget, Pedro Pascal as Joel is like the perfect Joel. I can't believe it. And, I've seen him in other stuff and all that stuff, but he really just feels like Joel here. And it's so great to see. My real contention point when I was seeing the trailers and all of that was neither of the characters were going to feel like their counterparts in the video games. Joel really does. So Pedro Pascal really does. But when I was seeing the trailers, I'll be honest with you, Bella Ramsey did not give me that impression. Bella Ramsey as Ellie, specifically, I'm referring to. I've seen Bella Ramsey, of course, in Game of Thrones, and I've seen her on some other stuff, but I just didn't think visually, and I don't know if this is offensive. I don't mean it in an offensive way, but like, I didn't really think visually that it worked as well with Bella Ramsey. I don't know why. I just couldn't like see it. But the trailers didn't give any dialogue or anything like that. So I gotta say, when we finally saw it tonight in this episode, like for sure it's Ellie. It's just insane. Yeah, they don't visibly look the same, but it kind of goes back to the point. Sometimes it matters when you get it like one for one of like the original source material. Sometimes it doesn't. With Ellie, yeah, she doesn't really look like Ellie, but that's fine. This is Ellie. Like this really does feel like the Ellie we know and love from the games. And again, I never fully played the games, but I watched them, so I get a little bit of credit for that. Anyway, I really thought the casting was well done, and you could see immediately off the bat with the two of them that they have a lot of chemistry. I'm glad to see the casting seems to have worked here for the first time ever. And I watched parts of the Halo thing. I've seen some other video game, like I think The Witcher and some other stuff. Usually video game adaptations don't work. I'll be honest with you though, and this is only episode 1, so we have a full season to go through and things like that, but this one seems to work because unlike other ones, the Last of Us video game is really grounded. It feels like just a really Hollywood written story. And you don't see that with things like Halo, The Witchers and all that cuz those are fantasy shows. I know there's others out there, but they're the first two that come to mind. But The Last of Us really does feel like a perfect video game adaptation because the story is just so compelling. I think that's awesome. And really quickly back to the Outbreak, because I'm looking at my notes here. Really quickly back to the Outbreak. I like when shows introduce, when zombie shows and things like that introduce with an outbreak. I think it's one of the more interesting parts, and I think they absolutely nailed it on the head here with that. It's something that I wish The Walking Dead did. Like, I wish we could see more of that. But yeah, I really liked that introduction. And then the rest of the story was really interesting. The time jump we got from 2003 after Joel lost his daughter up until 2023 Boston, which I didn't realize The Last of Us was in Boston, honestly. That's how little I really know about the full thing, but didn't really realize that. And I gotta say, the visuals were awesome here. The set pieces were awesome here. So I've actually been playing the video game Rust. I don't know if any of you know of that video game, but I've been playing that a lot lately. And the setting of where they were at in Boston reminded me a lot of the outposts in the game Rust. And so far, the story setting and the way it's told and the salvaging and all of that stuff kind of felt like Rust, to be honest with you. But yeah, I really liked that time jump we got. I liked the reintroduction of Joel. I didn't realize that he's a drug dealer. I honestly never knew that. So that was really interesting to see. But it lost me a little bit. I'll be completely honest with you. The only, like, I guess, negative I have about the episode is it lost me a little bit with, I think, Marlene was her name. Marlene's story with Ellie. I understand what they're gearing towards because I know that part from the video game. But I kind of felt like the way that they introduced Joel to Ellie and them just needing a car battery, I felt like it could have been developed a little bit more because it kind of just seemed like a quick push. Okay, let's get you to meet Ellie. It didn't really feel grounded. I didn't really understand what him and Tess were doing, to be completely honest with you. Like, I was trying to follow as hard as I could, but I felt like they kind of dropped the ball a little bit on explaining what exactly they were doing and why. I know they were going after Tom. Believe me, I fully understand that. I know they're trying to go get Tom and they needed the car battery. It lost me a little bit with how they got to Marlene and all of that stuff. They didn't tell it. I don't know if that's on purpose. I don't know if it's because there's more to tell there. But it kind of lost me there. So I'm hoping maybe some of that gets cleared up as we go. But it was really interesting to see. The other little negative I had, and this is just me being really nitpicky, but the other little negative that I had was the lightning towards the very end of the episode where Joel beat up the soldier, which was awesome, by the way. The lightning looked like they were on a set. Like, it didn't look like lightning. It was a little cheesy. It looked like they were literally shining like the ring light I have above me just on the characters. It's a little silly detail, but it kind of bothered me because lightning does not look like that, and it was just funny. But the scene that took place, I'll be honest, was absolutely awesome. Seeing Ellie stab the guy and then Joel kick in, get the flashbacks of what happened with his daughter, which was just like the video game, to be honest with you, and seeing all of that and him just go to town on this guy, really cool to see, and really sets an interesting dynamic where Joel and Ellie looked at each other and you could tell they're like, damn, interesting. Just, I gotta say, all around interesting. Again, briefly know the story from the video games, but very excited to see more as we go. I am very excited for the rest of the show. I can't wait to learn more about the story overall and just honestly go from there. So I just want to say before we wrap up, I am not going to be doing The Last of Us reviews or any show reviews episodically. I just intend to do this one, episode one, and then a recap. And of course, if there's anything along the way that I want to make a video on, I'm absolutely going to do it, but I'm not going to do a review episode by episode. I just don't want to do that. I feel like that's a way that you just become like a one show channel, like a one trick pony. I don't want to just do that. I want to talk about this show. I want to talk about The Walking Dead, Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, whatever I want to talk about. I don't want to be just stuck doing episodes of The Last of Us. But I will say, I will be making videos on The Last of Us. You could guarantee that because I will be watching this show. Can't wait to see episode 2. Can't wait to see the rest of the episodes of this show. And I can't wait to see you back for another video I do on The Last of Us because I guarantee you I will be back for another video on it because this really came out swinging. I'm glad to see we finally have a good video game adaptation done right. And I can't wait for the future. But with that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this. If you liked The Last of Us Episode 1, let me know in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know in the comments. Really interested to hear your thoughts, especially if you've played the video games. I really want to know what your experience was like going into this and what you got out of it. Let's start a healthy conversation down there below. And with that out of the way, thank you so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.